How do you turn a big idea into something people across an organization can believe in and act on? Today on Marketing Over Bourbon, we're sitting down with someone who has spent his career inspiring leaders and their teams, Keith Smith. I'm your host, Sheila Butler of Butler Marketing Group, and Keith is a former HR executive at Disney and the founder of Keith Smith Consulting, where he works with creative, mission-driven leaders to turn vision into reality. In today's show, we explore how to align people around big ideas, the relationship between culture and change, what Keith learned as a Walt Disney World ambassador, and how tools like improv and intentional facilitation can help leaders navigate the unexpected. So grab your favorite bourbon, settle in, and enjoy this conversation with Keith Smith. Keith, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers to you.
This is fantastic.
I know, right? Ooh.
What a way to have a conversation.
Oh, oof, wow, whoa, man.
Surprise.
I'm trying to remember what I poured today. Oh, Templeton's Rye. Okay, that's why it cut me a little bit different. All right, because rye versus whiskey. Yep. All right, anyway, or bourbon. All right, so we're going to dive in career journey first. We got to start with this, okay? So you spent 3 decades in HR leadership at Disney, ultimately serving as Senior Vice President of HR, and now you lead Keith Smith Consulting. So can you share your journey and what led you to focus on helping visionary leaders turn big ideas into reality?
Yes. I have a bachelor's in theater. And that kind of started everything for me from the creative side. I've always really been interested in creativity. When I was growing up as a kid, I would do puppet shows in our garage. I would do magic shows at children's birthday parties and dress up like a clown. So it was always about like entertainment and creating experiences for people where they were just having fun. So that's kind of been a theme if I was to look backward over my life. But it also served as a foundation for my career because I was able to take the skills that I learned. I did a major in theater, and I started out as a theater major with a English minor because in my head it was, okay, I could be the English teacher at the high school that directs the shows. Right? So that was my thought going into it. And I quickly learned English as a minor was not my gig, and I was not interested in doing it at all. So I switched to business minor. And I've always been interested in business, but I was also interested in the business side of theater. Mm-hmm. So they blended really well together for me. And that's, again, been another theme for me throughout my career. So I took the skills I learned on the stage, and I've been able to apply them in my career. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of one of the passion projects that I've done, which is a workshop using improv skills in the business workplace. But I've been able to use those skills throughout my career, right? So it's about helping navigate change, dealing with ambiguity, building effective and perceptive relationships, like all those things supported me. And I happened to end up at Disney, which was a creative company. So that creative piece was still there, even though I was in human resources and maybe I was supporting a business like a hotel, right, or a theme park. I could go be an HR person at any hotel chain, national brand. But it wasn't about being at a hotel. It was about being at Disney. Yeah. And the ability to work in a creative company with creative individuals is kind of what led me there. And then I just loved it because it seemed to align with all of my passions around what I learned in my bachelor's degree on theater and those skills and the business side.
Amazing. All right. So I've got a couple of add-on questions for you. Okay. So one, what was your first gig at Disney?
So my first gig, I started out, lived in Rochester, New York, born and raised Rochester, New York, and never really thought of working at Disney. And it was actually my husband who made the suggestion of, hey, let's go work at Disney, right? He'd always wanted to do that. So packed up our lives in a U-Haul, drove down to Florida, walked into the casting building on property and went up that ramp. And I'm like, I'm here, hire me. And I ended up getting a seasonal role at an attraction that's no longer around called Superstar Television.
I remember Superstar.
And it was so much fun, right? So my role was to help select the guests from the crowd that would be up on stage. Yep. And the theme behind it, if you've not seen it, is they superimpose you using a green screen into some classic movie skits. So one of them was like the Lucy and Ethel episode in the Chocolate Factory, where the conveyor belt is spewing out chocolate. So a guest would actually go up and be in that skit with the green screen behind them, and the audience would then be sitting and watching it on the big screens as if it's really happening. So my role was to help those guests, guide them, be with them throughout the experience, make sure they get on and off stage, kind of coach them in the moment, and I loved it.
Amazing.
Yeah, so
All right,
that was where it started.
I had no idea that you had a theater background. My undergrad is music and business/arts administration.
Yeah, perfect.
And yeah, same thing. Exactly. You draw upon those roots a lot.
Yeah. I always say, where do you learn to listen in the moment, pivot when things aren't working, to read an audience, right? So unless you've taken a theater class or an arts class or maybe an improv workshop, generally you don't learn that in your academic career. And many times those aren't in training sessions in a company either.
And to think on your feet.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to dive into the Disney Ambassador Program, right? So you were part of the 1996 team and you represented, and I'm going to have you explain more about the history of the Ambassador Program, but you represented tens of thousands of Disney cast members as a spokesperson for the company. So what did that experience teach you about representing an organization in the media? And if you don't mind, starting with the history of the Disney Ambassador, all the way back to the days of Walt.
Absolutely, yeah. So Walt started the ambassador program back at Disneyland. When he was building Disneyland, he was inundated with requests for people from the media specifically, but to come and learn about what he was doing and share the product. So he created this role as a kind of goodwill representative of the company, but also to help take some of the pressure off of him and to speak to the media and talk about the products that are coming and talk about the great ideas and the solutions. So it's steeped in a lot of history back to the beginning of Disneyland. And then when Walt Disney World opened in 1971, same thing. The program then came here to Florida. And the same role, right, was to kind of serve as a representative of all of the cast members of Walt Disney World, to be a goodwill emissary to the world, to represent the company, to represent the brand, and to talk about all the things that are happening. So that's the history of it. Interestingly enough, until 1995, it was always a female. That was the Walt Disney World ambassador, and it was always a single person. Single in many ways, but in the early days, you truly had to be single. But it was always one person. So in 1995 at Walt Disney World, because of the scope and size of the property and also all the projects that were happening, they went to a team concept. So 1995 was the first year that they introduced males into the program. So 96, I like to say I'm male number 4 because of how we were called up on stage for the ceremony. So I'm male number 4 in the Walt Disney World Ambassador Program, actually in the Ambassador Program overall.
All right, so I'm trying to remember, who else was on the team that year?
So with me was Darren Chiappetta, Gail Stevens, and Sarah Jones. So there were 4 of us.
Okay, so there's a Facebook group that's a private group. Where we worked at Disney in the 80s and 90s.
Yes, I'm on that.
Right, there are people who share stories. And I was a finalist.
You were?
For those 2 years, 95 and 96, right? And so I posted a picture, and Darren's standing next to me, and I'm just like beaming. I'm in this like cute white skirted suit, and I have like all the stars in my eyes. And I wrote something like, 60 seconds before you find out your Disney dream is dashed.
Oh, no.
And so Darren sees the post on Facebook, and then he writes, Sheila, I literally spit out my coffee this morning when I saw the post, because he didn't expect to see his picture in the Facebook
because
feed
that was
day.
during the ceremony when we're all on
100%.
stage waiting for our names, like Miss America, right? Waiting for our names to be called.
Right.
And you don't know if you're going to get selected or not.
It's very stressful because you basically find out whether or not you get the job that you interviewed for.
100%.
But there are like hundreds of people in the audience, and you have to give this quick little speech beforehand, even though everything's already decided.
100%.
Anyway, what did you learn from that experience of being an ambassador and representing a company in the media?
Yeah, especially a company like Disney, right, whose brand is so strong. And Disney is so good at marketing and the media and public relations, right? So the training we got was just incredible, and it helped open my eyes, not only for that role, but for the work that I did beyond and work that I've done with nonprofits in terms of coaching individuals to, do better in interviews or presentations. But it was really about, I learned to stay on topic, right? Like there was a reason why that person was sitting down to talk to me. And the things we learned about media is sometimes they want to get you off kilter. They want to get you talking about different things because they want an angle. They want a scoop. And maybe you'll say something that'll give them an inside scoop that all the other media won't get, right? So they really try to kind of push you. And the biggest thing for me was to stay on topic and always to bring it back to that key message point in various ways while still having fun and engaging. So that was a really good learning for me as to just how to speak publicly about a brand that is beloved by millions of people, a product, to make sure that you're there to get the message you're supposed to get out.
Yes, exactly. I it's interesting. I've got a client and they're starting a podcast. It'll be live by the time the show airs. And we've talked a lot about when you're in a live interview, how do you redirect the question if it's not what you want to get you to the message that you're looking to deliver, right? And I think that goes back to the brand promise and the reasons to believe that brand promise, those supporting pillars, to make sure that you're really explaining the brand in the way that you need to. And sometimes what you don't know is that clip may only be 15, 20 seconds in the span of a 20 or 30-minute interview. So how do you make sure that you're constantly hitting the beat, making sure you get the marketing message out there?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've done a lot of work as a volunteer with the Miss America organization. So in the interview portion for a lot of young women is the scariest, right? Because they just feel like they don't have any control. And the thing I try to reiterate to them is you are in 100% control of that because it's exactly what you just said. It's what you say and where you lead the conversation. So if you're going to lead them in a direction that you've said something, they're going to follow up with it. Well, you took them there, right? So now you got to get them back. And I think that's empowering for a lot of people that maybe get nervous in those situations is to remember you're in control of that conversation and you can guide it back very easily.
Exactly. So senior HR leadership at Disney. So given your 3 decades there, you held a range of HR roles and ultimately served as senior vice president of HR. So what are a few of the biggest lessons that you took away from leading people and change in a heightened expectation environment that Disney has?
Great way to say it. Yes, there are very high expectations at Disney because, again, of our brand. We're protective of our brand. We have a strong culture. We expect things to be perfect. We're a nice culture, right? So I think operating in that environment can be challenging at times because you don't always hear what people are really thinking. So I think one of the pieces is to really build relationships. And that's the thing I lead with is building relationships and having trust because then you can maybe find out from people what they're really thinking when they may not be telling you that something you're doing is not appropriate or it's not going to help them meet their goals or objectives. So that's number one. The other one is, as I went through my career, nothing ever happens on your timeline, ever, right? So you think you're ready for something and you get frustrated because you're not getting it. I was, sitting in one role for 5 years, and that was a long time for me to be in one role for 5 years, and I got really frustrated. So I learned that 5 years really helped get me ready for the next role, even though I thought I was ready earlier. So it's being patient and recognizing that, but then building advocacy as well, having conversations. In that 5-year period where I was stuck, I went and talked to a number of different people that could have influence or be advocates for me in my career. And I said, this is what I want to do. What's getting in the way of you being an advocate for me? And listening to that and then taking the feedback, synthesizing it, putting plans into actions, and then reporting back and going, hey, thank you. Here's what I heard you say. Here's what I'm doing.
Right.
And that builds your advocacy, but it also helps you hear maybe some things that people aren't saying to you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I also think that in an organization as large as Disney, you have so many different avenues where you can take the transferable skills in HR, in marketing, et cetera, and find other ways to really grow within the company. I think when you're in a smaller organization, the ladder, this is the path, right? And they say, well, for that role, this is where it leads to the next role, the next role, the next role. And that often isn't what someone wants. Right? So, but that's the only thing they have to offer.
Yeah, it's the idea of a career lattice versus a career ladder. And Disney is a prime example. We value people moving around at Disney. Some companies, that's a no-no, but we enjoy breadth of experience because I get to learn about different pieces of the business and get different perspectives. So sometimes it's a lateral move. Sometimes maybe it's a step backward to be able to move forward. So that traditional career ladder is something that we believe that there's a shared responsibility between the employee, the cast member, and their leader in the company to really set that career direction. But the person in the driver's seat's the employee. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And you do expand your network exponentially, right? When you
100%.
make those shifts and you're
Yes.
working in either different divisions or in different areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you remember the cross utilization program at Disney?
I do.
So I was across you. That's how I got my start in marketing, was convincing someone. I was in entertainment, and I convinced someone in marketing to hire me for the Disneyana convention, the last one that was in
Perfect.
Walt Disney World.
Okay.
And it was in the special events development team, and it was being led by someone who had just come over from entertainment. And so after the first year, they were like, "We don't really have a full-time job for you. You have to go back to entertainment." They were like, "But the cruise line is about to launch, and someone's going on maternity leave. So do you want to be that person?" So you just have to make your own opportunities.
100%. Yeah, that's you miss 100% of the chances you never take. Right?
Exactly.
I cross-viewed as well. I cross-viewed when I started at
Right.
Superstar Television and
Okay.
Operations. They had cross-view auditions for character entertainment. So I cross-viewed into character entertainment, and because I'm a tall person,
Right.
there's not many of us. So I ended up being able to transfer into that role. But again, it was across you. I could stay in my current job, and it was about learning more about the company and the entertainment thing.
Yeah,
Once again,
exactly.
surfaces its
I
head.
love that
Yeah.
program. I think it was very hard. Actually, from an HR perspective, it was probably very hard to figure out where all the cross-views were. Because I would call my boss in entertainment, and I would say, "Hey, Terry, it's Sheila. Yeah, everything's going great." She's like, "Do I need to keep your job open?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm staying another year in marketing, so yeah, keep my..." Because they had to keep your head count,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great way to get breadth of experience again.
Yes.
Another great thing that the company does is during peak periods, right? Is folks that work behind the scenes, maybe in offices or in some of the non-theme park or hotel businesses, is the parks are busy. Like think Christmas, Easter, any holiday where schools are out, summertime, right? So they would have a program where people sign up and they come out and work in the parks.
Yeah.
But it gets you out of the office.
Yeah.
It reconnects you to the product, to the guests. And it's a great opportunity to just kind of re-spark your pixie dust as well.
What's the shift? So I'm assuming you did that.
I did it. And I
Right?
got
Okay.
sent to Cosmic Rays, which is the fast food restaurant in Tomorrowland at the Magic Kingdom.
Right.
And is probably, it's been touted as the busiest fast food restaurant in the
Right.
world. And I got sent there every time filling food orders, which was great. But after an hour, and I'm like, okay, this is like, how could someone do this all day long? And people do it with smiles on their faces. It was just, it
It's so
boggled
true.
my mind.
The most memorable cross-view one that I had was at Pinocchio's Village House.
Okay.
And I show up, so I'm in the kitchen, and I think they had me make peanut butter sandwiches for about 2 hours. And then I had to slice endless amounts of tomatoes for the other 2 hours of my 4-hour shift. I think it took me like 20 years to have peanut butter, like a taste of a peanut butter sandwich again, because it's like, I don't know how anyone could do this every day. But actually, one of my favorite cross-view stories is a gentleman by the name of Tom, who was in entertainment, ended up being my leader in special events development. And he was sharing one day that his cross-view was he was in the ice cream parlor on Main Street. And so he's scooping ice cream. And he hears someone call his name. And they're like, "Tom," and I won't say his last name, but it's like, "Is that you? Your mom and dad said that you worked here at Disney." And he's thinking, like, I lead the special events development team in marketing. Like, I'm a director, but she thinks that I scoop ice cream every day on Main Street. Like, okay, yeah, it's me. Great to see you. Right.
But even that, right? Like, and there's nothing, like, not disparaging any of those roles because the
amazing.
fact that you worked at Disney, it was the same, right? When I went back to my hometown, didn't matter what I was doing.
Right.
You're like a superstar because you work at Disney.
I know. It was amazing.
That's great. That's hysterical.
Okay, so culture built on purpose, not accidents. So you talk about culture being built on purpose. When you walk into an organization today, what are the signs that you look for to tell whether or not the culture is intentional or if it just sort of came to be that way?
That's a great question because every organization has culture, whether you've built it on purpose or it has just been allowed to happen.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes the ones that are allowed to happen are really positive cultures, but some of the signs are you really have to look to leadership because leadership leads the way for culture building because leadership demonstrates it through behaviors, through what they recognize and reward, what they tolerate, what they don't tolerate, and what gets appreciated. That helps to build your culture. So if you see that there are things happening that really aren't a great culture, but they're not being addressed, that's a sign that culture is just happening by chance.
Yeah.
If you see leaders that aren't walking the talk, right? This applies to everybody else, but not to me. If you see posters on the wall that talk about the culture and the vision and the mission, but you don't see any of that being acted out in reality in any of their processes or how they interact with each other or they interact with their customers or clients, those are big red flags that your culture is not designed on purpose. So what you want to see, obviously, is leaders that are engaged, that are role modeling, walking the talk, that are out there supporting what they say they are about, and they're recognizing, they're holding up the behaviors that are the ones they want people to repeat, because culture is made up of people's behaviors.
Yes.
So it's paying attention to those or not.
Yeah. And how do you help them shift that culture if you do see that it's by accident and not intentional?
Yeah. The big question is, what kind of culture do you want to have? And then do you really have that culture?
Yeah.
And if you don't, then how are we going to get there? And there has to be, first of all, a willingness, right? You can't make, I always say, you can't make anyone do anything. I can't make you change. All I can do is I can create the environment for you to be productive, to be happy, to be engaged. So if I'm doing everything I can to create that environment, that's where we focus, right? So what's it going to take to create the environment? What are the steps that we have to take? And a lot of times it starts with leadership and coaching leaders, talking about behaviors, talking about what's an acceptable behavior, what's not an acceptable behavior. And then I'm always a fan of high involvement. So getting people involved in the process, because they're going to help to support it because they were part of creating it.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of three-step process, starting overall with leadership, then looking at, for me, the middle management level is the most critical, because they're the sandwich between the senior leaders who are setting direction and the front line who is implementing. So they have to translate both ways. It's a tough job, right? They've got to listen to what's happening in the front lines, send that information up, but they've also got to translate down, here's our vision, mission, goals, and here's how we're going to do that.
Yeah.
So it's paying attention to those three layers and then getting them engaged.
Very good. Another thing that you talk about is the ghost light as a central metaphor. And it aligns, I believe, with culture as well as behavioral ghosts inside an organization. So can you explain that concept, and how do leaders start to identify and address those ghosts in their own culture?
Absolutely. On my website, there is a whole section dedicated to the ghost light, because it is the logo that I chose for my consulting business. And it's a nod to two things. It's a nod to my creative background in theater. So it's just some history on the ghost light. So the ghost light, if you don't know what it is, it's that bare light bulb that usually sits on like a metal rolling stand that they put out on the bare stage when the theater's empty. So usually it's dark in the theater, but there's this one light bulb sitting on stage. That's the ghost light.
Yep.
And the reason it's called a ghost light is the theory that it chases the ghosts away. You know, the theaters usually have ghosts in them from past performers or something. So it's keeping the ghosts away, but it's also creating safety because it illuminates the stage. So if I'm walking into a dark stage and I don't see the edge and I fall off of it, well, it's going to stop me from doing that because now I can see it. Or if there's scenery or props or things on the stage that I might bump into or trip over. So it creates that safety. So for me, it was the perfect analogy and the perfect icon to translate into my HR consulting business, because it connects my artistic side with my leadership, but also it talks about what I do in my business, which is creating safety, right? Creating, whether that's psychological safety for people to feel comfortable to have a conversation or maybe say something that's not working well in the organization. But it's also illuminating the shadows, because the higher up you go in the organization, the less and less honest people will be with you about what's really working or what's not working. So I say, I come in and I illuminate those shadows. What's lurking in the shadow that the leader's not hearing, that's getting in the way of them implementing the vision that they have?
Yeah.
And the ghost part of it is, every organization has people that are no longer with the organization, but they had a really strong impact on the culture that we talked about before. It could be a positive impact or it could be a negative impact. But when their behavior is still lingering in other people, those are the ghosts that I talk about, right? So they're really not there anymore, but their ghost is there and it's still influencing how things are happening in the organization.
Yeah. Especially when people are motivated because they've really cared for that leader.
Yes.
And they're having a very difficult time sort of moving on.
Right.
So it's almost like out of reverence to this person who's no longer within the organization.
It could be. Yeah. And especially when it's a very strong ghost in a positive way, right? That's a good thing. But if you've got a ghost that was a bad impact, a bad influence on culture and the organization, and left this wake of destruction behind them, That's a ghost you don't want wandering the hallways anymore, but they still do.
Yeah. Well, I also love the fact that your logo is so intentional, and it comes from not only your background and what you're passionate about, but also the multiple layers of what it telegraphs to potential clients, right? It's interesting in my line of work, working with people, often as we're defining the brand and then the marketing look and feel, people want to jump to the really fun, sexy stuff, which is typically the logo and the tagline. And they don't want to do the basics of the work, of the strategic piece of it. When I was defining my brand promise and then my point of difference for my company, I actually picked a kaleidoscope because my point of difference is that I come with a unique perspective, having worked in financial services and theme parks and cruise and tech startup and all these different things. And so I feel like I see something that other people don't see, because when you look through a kaleidoscope, it shifts every single time and you see something a little bit different. So I appreciate the fact that, again, you chose something that was very intentional about what you're promising your potential clients.
Yeah, it was probably the thing that I was most clear on when I was just doing the whole branding thing and trying to identify something. And again, no one may even look at that section of my website, but I felt like I had to put it there to explain what that was, because it was so intentional for me and the connection that it makes back.
Fantastic. All right, I'm going to give you a chance to sip on your beverage while I thank our sponsor, D3 Brewing Company. So D3 Brewing Company, they are the makers of Benny's Brew, Three Wishes, Retired Rides, and many other fine craft beers. They know the importance of creating connections and crafting something unforgettable. So whether you're toasting to a big idea, celebrating a small win, or just savoring a moment of inspiration, D3 Brewing Company has the perfect pour for every occasion. And with every sip, you're not only enjoying an excellent brew, you're part of a story about loyalty, fun, and bringing people together. So cheers to great beer, great conversations, and the magic of D3 Brewing Company. So drinks up. All right, that was your hot second.
It was great. I got a couple sips in. It was perfect.
Okay. So aligning people around the next big idea. So you often work with leaders who have a big vision, but they may get stuck getting everyone aligned on that vision. So when you're brought in to help, where do you start, and what does it take to move from these sort of random scattered ideas into something that really is a cohesive, actionable plan?
Sure. And then this is where my creative background comes in, right? And I talk about the intersection of creativity and leadership. So because I came from the creatives background and I worked with a lot of creatives, I understand how the creative mind works. And I like to come alongside someone who's creative because I can put a structure in place. I always say I love putting order to chaos. So, and it's not that being creative is chaotic, but the creative mind is always going. They're always thinking of ideas. And the type of leader that I like to work with is a creative, visionary, mission-driven leader. Because they always have these big ideas, but they sometimes struggle with the execution side of it. So for me, the execution side is where I shine. So I like to come in and understand from them what they're trying to accomplish, right? Get the big picture vision. And then going back to eliminating the shadows, find out why it's not happening. Maybe their team doesn't see the vision that they see, or there's barriers that are preventing them from getting there. But understanding what those are, because if you don't address those and remove them, you're never going to be successful. And then it's putting it together in an organized plan. I'm a big fan of matrices. I always create this matrix and just plot everything out and put it into an order. And then we proceed through that process to go through those steps and identify the plans that need to be taken, who needs to be involved to help accomplish that vision.
Yeah, perfect. Improv. I'm fascinated by this. And you touched on this a little bit, but we're going to dive deep into this now. Okay, so you have a workshop, right, called Improv, Your Impact.
Yep.
And you help leaders use improv to increase creativity, support their partners, pivot, however they need to, especially on the fly. What are a few of the improv principles that leaders can borrow to be more effective in their conversations as well as decision making?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I already talked about some of the things. Where do you learn to do these things, right? I talked about that earlier. But when you think about improv, there's kind of 3 foundations and then there's 5 rules of improv. I won't go through them all, but I think the foundations kind of introduce the overall bedrock of the skills of improv. And the first one is to notice more, right? And it's not about like, noticing what's right in front of me, but notice more what's around you in the world, what's happening in the environment, what's happening in the room that you're in, and taking that in, because then you have the opportunity, once you notice more, which takes you to the second foundation, which is use everything. So if I'm noticing more, like, for example, I'm noticing there's a carpet on the floor, right? Well, that then carpet could become an opportunity or an offer for me at some point in my conversation, in the presentation I'm delivering, in the chat I'm having with my boss, and maybe something goes wrong or something gets thrown at me that I don't expect, because that never happens, right? I mean, we get thrown things all the time that we don't expect. So I've noticed that it's there. It's an offer to me. And the third foundation is to let go. So I need to let go of what I thought that conversation was going to be, or what I thought my presentation was going to be, or what I thought the audience should be doing in response to what I'm saying. I have to let go of that and be willing to be changed and do something different. So in that conversation that I'm having, and the boss might ask me a question I don't know the answer to, or might throw something at me that was unexpected, I might look down and I go, you know what? Is that rug new? I really like that rug. Really makes your office look nice. And we might talk about the rug for a minute, right? Yeah. And then it allows me a moment to think, to regroup, to get back on track, right? But so it's a simple example of those three. And where those three overlap is the sweet spot, right? So if you can notice more, use everything, and let go all together, that's the sweet spot. And then you build the rules of improv on top of it, like yes-anding and
I love yes-anding.
All of those things.
We're taking a quick bourbon break. So while glasses are refilled, let's talk about something as important as a good pour: your marketing. I'm the founder of Butler Marketing Group, and we help businesses, small, medium, and Fortune 500, navigate growth and transformation with marketing that's strategic, intentional, and built to leave a legacy. Whether you need branding, marketing strategy, loyalty, or a fractional chief marketing officer, we've got the perfect blend of services for your business. Contact Butler MG to get started. Now, back to the show. Nonprofits. So you also work with nonprofit leaders on building teams, thriving teams. So what are some of the common cultural challenges that you see in mission-driven organizations? And what practices make the biggest difference in creating a healthy, sustainable culture in nonprofits?
Yeah, I do. My parents, I attribute this to my parents. I have a passion. It's in my DNA to give back. So I have a passion for helping to volunteer. My parents always took me to volunteer things when I was growing up, and I still to this day volunteer for different organizations. And it's important because, especially nonprofits, they have limited resources, but what they do have is they have leaders and people that are committed to that mission. And that's why they're there. But that also comes with a sharp side to it, which is sometimes when I'm so committed to a vision or to a mission, I may not be paying attention to some of the organizational pieces of it. So the program, one of the workshops that I do, is around helping leaders just pay more attention, right? Emotional EQ and IQ, not IQ, but emotional awareness, emotional intelligence, being aware of kind of my impact on other people, but also how to read the environment and what's happening. Because mission-driven leaders can get so focused on that mission or on the clients that they're serving or on the cause, and sometimes lose sight of the people in the organization and how to create a positive environment for them as well. So that's what I focus on in that program, about paying attention to yourself, really getting people engaged. Again, I believe in high involvement. So bringing people in, listening to the voices, what's working, what's not working, how do you make it a better work environment so that you can support the teams that are working so hard against the same mission that the leader's working for.
Very good. Friendships at work and a sense of belonging. So you've written about the value of friendships and how those relationships can last well beyond a job. Why do friendships and connections matter so much within organizational life?
They're critical. And in fact, there's research by a number of organizations that have shown that people that have a close friend at work are more engaged.
Yep.
They're more likely to stay with the organization. They tend to be happier, and they tend to be more productive. So friendships at work are really important. Now, you can't force people to have friendships at work, right? But you can create an environment again. And, friendships for me are so important. I have a group of counterparts that we work together, that we still get together every couple months for lunch. And we just enjoy being together. And 3 of us have retired. 1 of us has not yet. So we just enjoyed working together. And I remember back in the days, because when you go through, I'm going to say, a crisis together, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're in the trenches together. First of all, it builds really strong relationships, but then you have those war stories that you can rely back on, and they connect you together, and they help to strengthen that relationship. And like I said, trust and relationships are foundational, not only to me, but I think in any organization, because when you have those, you can get through anything together. You can be honest with each other. You can pull each other along. You can pat each other in the back or give a swift kick if you need to get them going, or be a shoulder to cry on.
Yeah.
So the power is there. And again, the research backs up that all of those great things happen in organizations when people are able to have friendships.
Yes. So let's talk about the leaving Disney and then becoming an entrepreneur from a consulting standpoint. So you transitioned after a very long time at Disney to launching your own consulting business, so Keith Smith's Consulting. What surprised you the most about this shift, and what advice would you give to people who are stepping into consulting or coaching?
Yeah, it was something that I had on a plan. It was a roadmap, and my goal was, if I could take early retirement from Disney and start my own consulting business, I would do it. So that was the goal. So I had started the process of preparing for that a couple years prior, intentionally thinking about not only the consulting business, but what was my role at Disney? What was I doing? What would I want to be doing? What would I want those final years to look like? And it helped me really form where I would go in my decisions near the end of my Disney career, to kind of move to a different role, given a position where it wasn't as stressful. I was able to give back to the organization, but it allowed me also to focus on what my next steps were. So that was very intentional. But preparing for the transition, everybody kind of is like, because you go from this very stable corporate environment where you get a paycheck every week and you got all your benefits covered and all these great perquisites, and you're around people that you like to work with, and you have all this supporting infrastructure, to it's just you. So I think every person who makes that shift goes through this moment of sheer terror and panic. It's probably more than a moment. It was months and months and months. But I think for me, and this has always helped me, but getting information, getting knowledge, and preparing was really helpful. So I found someone who helped me tremendously prepare for that, coached and gave me advice and direction, and supported me through that transition process to get my consulting business set up. And then when I finally made the transition, there was this freedom, right, of knowing I could work where I want, when I want, with whom I want, and how I want, which didn't have the freedom to do before. And that was incredibly freeing. But then on the other side, the terror was, but I don't have any clients. And where am I going to get work? And how am I going to pipeline people? And I don't want to be out there marketing and selling products.
Pay is not steady.
No, and it's
the roller
not
coaster.
predictable.
Yep.
So I went through all the same emotions that a lot of people do in that process. But I think for me, it was really understanding. And my goal, too, was a little bit different. I was not looking to go back to the same hours I was working in the corporate world. Didn't want to have that schedule. I didn't want to have those demands. So I took some pressure off of myself by doing that, by not having to just jump right back into the rat race to do that. But then I also think about, well, how am I going to get clients, and how do I get work? And that came with time.
Yeah.
But, there were some very conscious decisions. And then there were some decisions that I said, you know what, I'm going to wait and see where things go. I was vacillating between, do I serve for-profit clients or do I serve not-for-profit clients? And I purposely said, you know what, let me just see where the path leads me. And back to my giving back, it's led me to a lot of nonprofit clients, surprisingly enough. Now I've got some for-profit, but I was very intentional about it. And I think that's the thing is, be intentional and know that the path may change, and be open to going where the path takes you.
So is there something that you wish you would have known then when you started your consulting business that you know now that you would tell yourself if you could?
Ooh, I don't know. What would I tell myself?
Because I'll give you food for thought.
Yeah.
So I asked people when I first was starting my Butler marketing group back in May of 2023.
Oh, okay.
And I was talking with our buddy Chuck Salvo, a fellow magic maker, as well. And I said, Chuck, what do you wish you would have known then that you know now? Because I want to sort of shorten the learning curve. And he said, say yes to everything. Because you think that all the work is going to pile up. And you're like, how am I going to get all this done? It's too much at the same time. And he goes, the timelines shift.
Yeah.
You know, a client gets delayed, something fast tracks. Just say yes to everything because you don't know when the next thing is going to come around the corner.
So true. Yeah, I would say the advice I would give myself is don't create anything until someone pays you to do it. Mm-hmm. So I could have a menu of offerings, which are things I could create in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. But don't spend a lot of time and effort and energy and money on creating it because you don't know if the demand will be there.
Right.
Right. So now you've invested resources into something that's not going to come to fruition versus get a demand and then build it and deliver it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Very good. All right. We're in the final stretch. All right. So we've got 4 traditional wrap-up questions. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. First one. I know you're not a big bourbon drinker, by the way. I'm still learning a lot about bourbon.
I've done research, so I got to put my glasses on.
Fair enough. I like sipping it, but I barely know stuff about bourbon, which is why future shows, I do have some people coming on. We'll do bourbon cocktails, food pairings, all this good stuff. So, yes, one of the standard questions is, if you were bourbon, what bourbon would you be and why?
Yep. So I had to research, right? Because I'm not a bourbon drinker. Okay. But Jefferson's Reserve.
Okay.
And here's why. According to my research, they're innovative, they're different, they're unique. And I think every person is different and unique. So that kind of drew me to that brand.
Very good.
But
I like
I ever
it.
had it? No.
That's okay. And I brought, it's interesting, on this set, so we redesigned the set. So you're the first guest in season 2 set.
Love it.
Which I'm loving. And yeah, I brought a lot of bourbons from home. I don't have Jefferson's yet. I need to add that to my bourbon bar.
So I know.
I know, right? All right, next time I see you.
Next time.
One of my favorite questions. This is so fascinating. Every time I ask this question, if you could experience something at Disney again for the first time, what would you want to experience again?
And this was so hard because 31 years, as you know, I've experienced a lot of amazing, amazing things. But I would have to go back to when I was in 1976, my family's one and only trip to Walt Disney World. So my mother, my father, my grandmother, we were in our Jeep Cherokee with the wood panel siding, drove down from Rochester, New York. And I remember taking the road that leads up to Contemporary, but it goes under the water bridge. And then you come up and there's the Contemporary. And I will always remember that view, right? So it was that first time to see that and just the excitement of we're here at Walt Disney World. I think after 31 years of experiencing so much amazing stuff, I'd want to go back and just have that experience of just seeing it for the first time again.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. I think it was my second visit to Disney, and it was the first really, really, really hot day that they had, and the monorail shut down in the Contemporary, and they had to take people down by really tall ladders. I know. Actually, no, that was my first trip to Disney. It was the first summer that Disney was open.
Oh, my gosh.
Right. All the things. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. I just aged myself.
Well, you know, I didn't say how old I was in 1976.
I cut that out of this show. Anyway. All right. So 2 last questions. One is from a previous guest, and then the last one you get to ask a future guest. Okay. So this question comes from Skip Schur, who started the Disney Day Drinkers group, so Club D3, and is the generous sponsor of my show.
Thanks, Skip.
So thank you, Skip. So he asked, because he's been the one guest so far who's never worked at Disney, but he's very Disney adjacent, having started Disney Day Drinkers. So he wants to know about being a cast member. What was it like, and what did it feel like to know that you're part of something that's so important to so many people?
Yes. Weighty. I would say, I think especially my role as ambassador, but just in my role in general, especially when I had the opportunity to travel, either personally or on behalf of the company. The minute the words "I work for Disney" come out of my mouth, there is an instant expectation of who you are, the kind of person you are, how you're expected to act, and who you're expected to be. And I felt incredible weight to fit into that because we worked for a brand that millions and millions of people know, first
Right.
of all, but also hold dear in their heart. And that was, I think, for me, always top of mind when I was out there. Is I was no longer Keith Smith. I was Disney, a representative of Disney, and I had to uphold the same standards when I was out in public or just talking to someone sitting next to me on an airplane, because that became the whole focus of the conversation at that point. Is, oh, you work at Disney, and tell me about it. And so you had to be Disney at that point.
Yes.
It was a lot.
My first job at Disney was in Magic Music Days,
Okay.
which was a part of Magic Kingdom Entertainment. And so we would stage manage all the guest bands and choirs and cheerleaders. I had 200 clowns in a parade one day. I know. When you mentioned clowns, I'm like, oh. Yeah, it was a clown convention in town, evidently. And I remember thinking that there was such a responsibility because these groups, they fundraise, right? They've sold candles and wrapping paper and pizzas and everything that they could sell, citrus, over like 3 years to pay for that day at Disney, where they're going to perform on stage at Disney Springs in front of World of Disney or in the Magic Kingdom pre-parade, right? And so I felt like I have to, I can't have a bad day, right? Because I'm it. I am Disney to them, and this is everything that they've been dreaming about. So you don't get to be grumpy. You need to smile the whole time. It was really hard to smile that much. It would hurt your face.
Yes.
Like, seriously.
What was the pressure? Right. I love you said I can't be grumpy.
Yes.
I can't. I had a coworker once, and it was so funny. She would, because I'm very even keeled, right? What you see is what you get. But she would always say, I just want to see you have a bad day. Right. And in my head, I'm like, but that's not who we are. But I get it. Like, you wanted to have the human side, and you wanted to know, like, if something was important to me. So I got that.
Yeah.
But I just, that's kind of part of my DNA. I was like, that's who we are.
Yeah. Very good. What do you want me to ask a future guest from you?
Okay. I would like to know, was there a time that someone believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself?
Oh, very nice.
question.
Okay. Oh, I've not had that question before. Thank you. Okay. I like this. All right,
Sorry
we're gonna
if
wrap
it's
this.
too hard.
No, it's good. We're gonna wrap this puppy up. All right, so Keith, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
You're sweet.
This was great.
So thank you for sharing your perspectives on culture and leadership and change. I know, I mean, I've been lucky to know you since the mid to late 90s. And for all of your years at Disney, what an incredible career. And now your thriving consulting business of Keith Smith Consulting. Incredible. So I value your perspective around aligning people with big ideas. And I think that that's something that everyone can learn from as they watch this show. I also want to thank Iron Pixel Studios, where we're here today, this incredible studio and incredible team, as well as D3 Brewing Company, the makers of Binny's Brew, Three Wishes, Midnight Pumpkin, Retired Brides, and many more for sponsoring the show. Thank you so very much. And then for everyone watching, I hope that today's conversation has encouraged you to think differently about you lead through change, how to build organizations and team culture that are built on purpose, and how to create environments where people have a sense of belonging. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to Marketing Over Bourbon. And remember, the best ideas often come when you take a moment to savor something great. So drinks up, Kungaloosh. We'll see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for being here. How fun.
This is fabulous. I just sit here and talk all day. You're a fantastic host.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so comfortable.
Yay.